Hey there, guys and gals at TNP. It's M again, back with another RP Spotlight. We have a very special guest today with Prydania. Pry, how are you?
I'm doing a super. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So, for anyone who has been living under a rock for the last few years, I guess,
I don't I don't
Prydania
discriminate.
is
Rock dwelling is valid in the current year.
so Pry is one of our longer serving RPers here for the past couple of years at least. He's in charge of the nations of Prydania and Stalker,
Stuck here and also Aurelia.
Aurelia, correct. So
It gets confusing because I took Aurelia over from another player who still goes by the name Aurelia. So, but yes.
and I believe that player is now Khalees, correct?
Yes, Khalees and soon to be Shiva, but that's actually an ongoing RP that we're working on, so that's exciting.
Lovely. So, Pry, one of the first questions I like to ask people is how did you come to TNP and TNPRP?
So I have been actually in nation states on and off since 2006. And my most lengthy stay was actually in Taijutsu, which is a treated region of TNP. And one of the big people who helped us found Taijutsu was Iluvatar, who a lot of people, might know as being an admin in TNP, former multiple-time delegate of TNP. And so because of that, even though I was in Taijutsu for a number of years, I was very well aware of TNP. And it was actually around the time that MJ started, after he took over TNPRP, that I started hearing some good things about TNPRP. There was a massive falling out between me and some others in Taijutsu that led to me taking about a year off. About a year later, I got a hankering to do some RP again. By that point, Taijutsu was basically dead, and kind of with nowhere else to really go. I was like, hey, I was hearing some good things about TNP. I'll pop over there and just see what it's like. And that was in the summer of 2017, and I have been here since.
And you've actually also made quite an impact. You have worked your way up. You are now one of the admins of our roleplay server here. You also serve as the lead forum moderator, if I'm correct.
Lead RP moderator, actually.
That's what it is. I stand corrected.
Yeah, no. I took over. I took over for MJ at the beginning of 2019. And so, sorry, beginning of 2020. I think it's starting to blur, but yeah, beginning of 2020, I took over as lead RP mod, and it's been fun. But yeah, it's actually kind of funny. I told myself specifically, kind of out of anxiety over the gameplay stuff that led to me leaving Taijutsu, that I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to TNP, I'm gonna RP, and that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna RP. I'm not gonna get involved in any gameplay stuff. And then I ended up being elected delegate, so that tells you how well those plans went.
You were also one of the most popular delegates of TNP.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
My favorite by far. My favorite by far.
Suck it, Fiji. No, I'm kidding.
We already have a really great audience question here from Zenferda. What was your first RP?
In TNP or in general?
You know what? Let's go with both.
Okay, so my first RP in TNP. Well, I'll start in general because that's probably the least interesting one. So I'll save the good stuff for last. My first RP was in the Lexicon, which was actually my first RP region. I forget my original nation in nation states was Anglo-Scotia, which was a pretty clear British XP. But I tried to do something unique with it in that the whole concept of it was like 1984 by Orwell meets Oliver Cromwell, and that was sort of the theme I was going for. Because I was an edgy 18-year-old at the time, and I decided, and so I forget where I spawned, but I moved to the Lexicon, which is actually where I met Elu, and it was in the Lexicon that the first RP I partook in was actually getting Anglo-Scotia involved in a multinational war. It became like this huge thing where I allied with some other dictatorships, and we actually beat those boring democracies. So that was actually the first RP I was involved in, and it is cringy as hell. I thought that the Lexicon forums were gone for good after a purge, but Elu actually linked me to the remnants of it, and I was like mortified. Elu wanted to reminisce about the Lex days for a bit, and I was like, "Where did you find this?" But you know, it's cringy, it's bad. But that was the first NSRP I ever did. The first TNP RP I did. The first TNP that I did in TNP RP I did was, well, there's a joke one called Nation on Edge, which I think is what Zen wants me to say, but I'm not going to say that because it was a joke RP, and nobody, no, and it was awful, and everyone should feel bad about it. But but it was from Malaya, Singapore, and it was this joke thing. And basically, what happened was I came into TMPRP, and just as I came in, there was this guy by the name of Malaya, Singapore, who was doing this awful RP that everyone was just sort of like joke posting in because it was just so bad. And I hadn't RP'd in like a year and a half, maybe closer to 2 years. So I was feeling a bit rusty, so I just like popped in and shit post in that. But like I tried to like work characters into it just so I could get back into the vibe of writing. But the first actual serious RP I did after joining TMP was called Over the Hills and Back, which starts just about a month after the conclusion of a 15-year civil war in Prydania. And the first post is Prince Tobias being crowned as King Tobias III. And then the remainder of that thread is sort of about how Prydania reconnects with the rest of the world, how the country begins its recovery, deals with some weeding out of syndicalist resistance here and there, and then kind of it ends with the syndicalist resistance kind of being smashed, and then the Bergen Pact being formed, which is still a thing in RP today. So pretty fun RP. I was like looking back, it's far less focused than a lot of the other stuff I've written, but I really had a lot of fun writing it, and honestly, I didn't think it was a bad effort for my first outing in like close to 2 years.
All right. So you've also mentioned the Civil War in Prydania, which you've covered quite extensively in
Yes.
an RP. I believe I believe it is the longest running RP at this point, which is called For the King to Valhalla.
Yes.
Almost, unless you are blind, you have heard of it if you are in TNPRP.
I'm actually very excited. It wasn't too long ago that it got to 4 pages, which seems kind of arbitrary, but I thought it was a big deal. I was excited about it.
Well, they're very good, focused, in-depth posts, and I very much enjoyed reading them.
Thank you.
So with For the King to Valhalla, you really kind of go into King Tobias's life and his struggle with growing up under syndicalist Prydanian and being hunted, basically.
Mhm.
What really kind of drives you with that RP?
Honestly, it's the characters. Um, a lot of it, if you read it, I think like a total of 2 or maybe 3 posts of that RP actually talk about like the battles of the Civil War as like actual battles. The majority of that RP is character focused stuff. Tobias is the main character, but it's branched out to other characters as well. And what keeps me focused, what keeps me excited to keep adding posts to that is, honestly, just the powerful emotional resonance that comes with kind of writing these characters as they try to deal with this very, very difficult time around them. The trials and tribulations that they go through. It's I mean, I will flat out admit here there have been posts that I have written in that thread where I have cried writing it. Like but that's not a bad thing. It motivates. It motivates, in my opinion. It is a really, really powerful experience to sort of get into these characters' heads and figure out why they, how they react to these situations, and that desire to kind of revisit those characters after that post is done. Is what keeps me coming back. There are plenty of characters who I've, done one post about them, and then I've thought, like, how would they have reacted in this situation or that situation, or even what are they up to now, or even what are they going to be up to a few years in the future? And then, that inspires and kind of drives me further.
Well, I'm really glad that you kind of kept that drive going with For the King of Valhalla. Another one of your series that
Hmm.
is newer but still ongoing is Down That Way to Keolyat.
Keoliet, yes.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that one. Unfortunately, I haven't kept up on that one as much as I'd like to.
Oh, so Down This Way to Keoliet is a fun thing, because I think it might actually be the first RP thread that I did in TNP where like none of the characters who appear are like important government people. Um, it doesn't feature anyone who is a prime minister or a king or a president or whatever. It was actually a thread that was spawned by an idea Kyle gave me, because Kyle and I have been working to sort of establish that there is a Prydanian immigrant community in his nation of St. Taj as a result of the Prydanian Civil War. He wanted to work an immigrant he wanted to work immigrant populations into St. Taj. I had a civil war. It seemed like a really good fit, and I've really enjoyed working with him. But what he recommended was that there could be a story of family reconnecting. So I kind of took a one post name drop character from another RP and kind of expanded his whole family out, and that's what led to Down This Way to Keoliet, which the gist of it is basically, you have these cousins who were separated over the course of the Civil War. A brother and sister pair and their parents went to St. Taj as refugee, immigrants. And then in Prydania, you had like the other cousin, Rurik, whose family's farm was collectivized, and he was in basically a labor camp for 11 years as a child and then young adult. And the the RP is about them reconnecting now that the war is over and they're able to find each other again. So that's what that RP is about.
Okay. And so, kind of like broadening out to Prydania itself.
Mm.
With Prydania's very tumultuous history, behind all that is a litany of fairly clear influences.
Mm.
A lot of Viking kind of culture,
Yes.
and some very deep Danish influence and very Beowulf-esque epic tales. Let's. Can I
Yeah.
get you to go like a little deeper into the influences behind Prydania?
So the language is Icelandic. The culture, as you said, is very Danish. Um, the influences are Beowulf, as you said. Beowulf was kind of the over influence of everything. In kind of an interesting way, like the story of Beowulf. The notes of the notes of the story of Beowulf don't really come up in anything I've written so far, save for some name drops. But the idea of Beowulf being this pagan story that is being told to us by a Christian author is something that kind of reflects the feel for Prydania, in that Christianity in Eris is called Messianism, and so in Prydania, it is a Messianist nation, but there are all of these, Norse pagan, or as we call it in Eris, Chthonic, influences. So that's kind of the Beowulf. That's kind of like the feel of Beowulf. Although I guess you could say that the whole Civil War is supposed to be the Hall of Heorot being under distress, but that would be navel gazing too much even for me. But beyond that, a big thing. So I'd say like a lot of the culture is very kind of drawn from Beowulf, kind of in terms of its structure. Another big influence was actually the Arthur myth. A lot of what Toby is as a character draws on Arthurian mythos. So I'd say a lot of inspiration for Prydania is Beowulf, King Arthur, various Viking myths from the prose and poetic Eddas, and then some Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, just to top it all off.
Well, it's shaped up to be a really fantastic nation, probably one of the more fleshed out ones in our little community here.
Oh, thank you.
So here's a little side question from a past guest, Stephen.
Hello, Stephen.
I believe this is more of a in-character question. How does Prydania feel being so barbarian? Do they ever feel like they can be civilized like the Imperium?
We don't worship a blood cult, so get wrecked.
I like that answer. That's a good answer. So another question from Mad Jack.
Mm.
How do you approach incorporating parts of your real life background into your RP without making everything self-congratulatory or self-inserts?
So I think a big part of that is that, like, as a writer, I think that everyone needs to just be aware that, like, you are always going to put a little bit of yourself into everything, regardless of if you're trying to be a self-insert or not. Because ultimately you only know what you know. You only know what you experience. And so, even the best well-written characters from the best authors in history have their author's personality or influences poured into them to some degree. It's inevitable. It's just human nature. And so I guess the thing about that is, to answer MJ's question, is I just don't run from it. Like, I know that no matter what, I'm going to incorporate some of what I know into a character, and because I'm okay with that, I don't worry, I don't stress about making it a self-insert, and that because I don't stress about it, I'm kind of able to expand upon it so it's not. A good example actually ties into Down This Way to Keoliet, because as I was writing that, I started thinking, about the situation that led to Rurik having his, when he was 10 years old, having his family essentially broken up and his family farm collectivized and him being sent to a labor camp. And I was like, that is a story that I could probably tell in For the King to Valhalla. So I did. And the thing about it is, in terms of my own background, like, I am Jewish. I have had family members who, have survived the Holocaust, who I've spoken to. I have heard multiple Holocaust survivors tell their story. This isn't an analogous situation, it's not a one-to-one analogous situation, but there are certainly enough similarities there that I kind of drew on a lot of that knowledge writing that post, and it made me cry like a bitch. But I was able to draw on that and write that post. And because it wasn't a strict one-to-one parallel, it allowed me to then kind of mold it in a way where it wasn't just a self-insert of experiences I have heard, or self-congratulatory, or even self-pity about my own background. I was able to kind of take that and kind of mold it into something that was similar, that still resonated, but was different.
Okay. And so, also with another thing about Prydania, there has been multiple, fairly brutal regimes with Anders the Third, and fascist Prydania and syndicalist Prydania. What really kind of drew you to explore those eras in Prydania?
So it's a combination of things, and I guess this is kind of where this kind of touches on what MJ said. Kind of MJ's question again is that, again, because of my own family history, there has been a degree of interest in fascism. So I kind of wanted to explore that in a way that I could, maybe tell a good story. In a lot of ways, it was also a way for me to do a call out to my previous days as Anglo Scotia, because that was a dictatorship. So I could kind of use fascist Prydania to put little Easter eggs in that only I would appreciate. But so that, and the character of Anders, who was the fascist king of Prydania from 1984 to 2002, really, the more I kind of thought about it, he kind of just appealed to me as a character, and I was like, I wanna do more of this guy. So that was what led to the fascist, to sort of wanting to explore the fascist regime. The syndicalist regime, honestly, was born out of my interest in British history. That is probably the area of history that I've spent the most time studying, and sort of, the radical left of the British political spectrum has always sort of fascinated me in a weird way. And I don't even know if this is just remnants of my love of 1984 as a book, but like stuff like the history of the Labour Party in the UK has always been fascinating for me. The miners' strike, the struggles of Neil Kinnock to kind of weed out Momentum, not Momentum, Militant, although history repeats itself. But Neil Kinnock trying to weed out militant in the in the 80s. All that stuff was kind of floating in my head about like, what if the British Labour Party, which became a social democratic, democratic socialist party, what if it had gone to the extreme? And so that was kind of where the syndicalist, that's kind of the genesis of the syndicalist Republic of Prydania. Thomas Nielsen, who was the syndicalist dictator of Prydania, I use Arthur Scargill for him, and he's a former miner in character for like very specific reasons. So it was basically me wanting to explore these histories and just wanting to see if I could write good stories about them. And honestly, because both fascism and syndicalism, which is used in a dictatorial way in the story, they're both dictatorships. They're both, as you said, brutal. And that was advantageous because I needed antagonists for my backstory. So what better way for antagonists than just groups of people that everyone kind of agreed suck anyway?
That's fair. That's fair. So, following the Civil War in Prydania and the downfall of the Syndicalists, it's kind of returned to a very, a somewhat peaceful, calmer Prydania.
Yes.
With King Tobias Lothbrok kind of taking a very strong leadership.
Oh wow, you got very tinny there, Em. Like your voice.
I'm having some minor connection issues. Is it okay now?
Yeah, that sounds better.
Perfect. So, with King Tobias and the people, so Toby has become like this kind of cult icon in the RP community, who has kind of like the following of like a major comic book character at this point.
It's become crazy, and I'm just really honestly happy that people seem to have reacted like positively to him.
Okay, you have to excuse me for a second. Oh no, there we go. So with Toby, you've really weaved a fantastic story with him, and not too long ago, he also married Alicia of Norcia.
Yes.
So let's kind of talk a little bit about that, because I know a lot of people, that is like, people love this, and people have loved what you've done with Norcia. Like, where do you see all of that kind of going? If you'd like to elaborate on it.
So Norcia and I have talked about this have talked about this a lot. They have kids, twin boys currently, Boulder and Hale. There's going to be a daughter on the way. Norcia and I have already agreed to that. It's just a matter of, waiting a bit before it happens. So they're going to have another kid. In terms of what's going to happen with the future, it's kind of a question of character versus nation, because Toby and Alicia, the thing that we're both going to do is kind of focus on the family side of things. Like, it's going to be about them kind of taking a step back, from being active players in their nation's, politics. Alicia less so, because she is more of she's more of an absolute monarch than Toby is. But like, they're going to focus on raising their family. The thing about Toby and Alicia, which make them really good for each other, is that like they both kind of have messed up family lives. And so like they're both in a position where they're happy to have each other and the family that they do have. So they're going to focus on that. Prydania and Norcia as nations are still going to have a lot going on, in terms of their internal politics, in terms of, what the future is going to bring. They're still going to be very active on the world stage, but Toby and Alicia as characters are probably going to be, far more focused on their families than they have been previously.
Okay. And so, just where do you kind of see the future of Prydania going?
The future of Prydania right now is, in my mind, broadly peaceful. The big thing that I wanted to do with Prydania was tell a story of what came after a civil war. A lot of people like doing RPs about civil wars, and very few people like RPing the aftermath of the Civil War. So, this is very much the, For the King to Valhalla is the Civil War, but everything else I do is kind of the aftermath of it. And what Prydania is going to do is Prydania is going to continue to recover. It's not going to be a 100% perfect situation, but nothing ever is. But it is going to be moving in a recovering direction. Things are going to, it's going to be about how the nation sort of deals with that, how the nation kind of reconnects with the rest of the world, how its economy is able to both recover and adjust, and diversify, actually. And that's kind of the story. It's kind of a low-key story about, a nation that's been through hell and then kind of, picks itself up and tries to keep on going.
Okay, so there was something I wanted to touch on also with your group efforts, kind of like within the RP community here. So there's been quite a few, actually. There's the Bergen Pact, the FSO, and a really neat little project that I have to mention. You and Kyle St. Ange have worked together to create the Eris version of Lego, complete with sets that you guys have built and put together.
Kyle built and put together. I want to give him the credit there, because that was all him building those. But yeah, Spilvel. So, like I said, Prydanian culture is very heavily based on Danish culture, and Denmark. Lego was a Danish company, and so one day I was kind of like, hey, there isn't an Eris version of Lego. I should world build this. So I did, and I did Spilvel. The problem was that due to the Prydanian Civil War, options for what I could do with it were kind of limited, because, again, the economy is recovering. You got this company that makes little plastic brick toys. How are they going to really recover, and how am I going to do anything with them? And Kyle suggested, it's like, what if the company's founders, or company's owners, got to St. Ange after the Syndicalists took over, and that was actually a really good opportunity to kind of keep Spilvel as this company that could do things. And then with Kyle, he made a bunch of really cool Lego sets for the Bloxor thing that we did, which is kind of like a Roblox clone. And it was kind of amazing, because he pitched the idea to me in DMs, and I was kind of like, oh, it was far above and beyond anything I wanted to do. And so I said, and so like I didn't want to like pressure him into doing anything, so he suggested it and was like, and I was like, oh yeah, like if you want to do something, go for it. And then he came back with these pictures of these sets that he'd made, and they were fantastic. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And then we just put them on the forum because it's not canon unless it's on the forum.
Well, I think everyone really enjoyed when that came.
Thank you.
So really briefly, I would like to touch on your other two nations, Iberia and here. So
Okay.
Irelia is the kind of seat of the Eris equivalent of Judaism,
Yes.
called, I believe, Shaddaism.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you kind of draw Irelia from, like your own personal upbringing inside Judaism kind of thing?
Well, a lot of the basics for Aurelia came from what the player Aurelia had built. He gave me the nation when he took a hiatus. Aurelia was vital to a lot of canon, and me, being Jewish, I didn't want to see this. I didn't want to see this RP nation that represented Judaism that had been done very well kind of vanish. So I offered to take it as a second nation, and I did promise everyone involved that anything that was canon I wouldn't touch, and I didn't. So, like, the bones of it were actually made by the player Aurelia, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that foundation. But what I've done afterwards has definitely sort of been influenced by being Jewish, by how I've sort of interacted with my own religion, and how I would kind of how I would, I guess, critique it is a good way. It's one of those things where it's like, if you're raised in a Jewish family, certain things become quite evident to you that you kind of want to talk about, but you can't talk about because you're not supposed to talk about these things. And so, how do you talk about them? And so, for me, I just write fiction. um, but a lot of it is also me using it to vent some of my own frustrations with just, I guess, how ideas of Jewish identity and Jewish cultural identity kind of play up. A big thing, which is something I kind of did with Prydania, because syndicalists targeted Shaddaists in Prydania. So I did this kind of thing where, with both Aurelia and Prydania, where I was kind of playing with my own existential angst about Jewish identity, just Jewish identity out in the world, where it becomes this very touchy subject where a lot of Jews feel great affinity for both the country that they were born and raised in, but then also great affinity for their own religion and their own ethnic traditions, and how sometimes things happen in conflict where you can't where you have to try to suss that out. So that's been something that Aurelia, the country, has kind of allowed me to do.
Okay. And so you also had Stuck Here, which
Stick here,
is
yes.
which is a really fun kind of nod to the Mandarin from Iron Man,
Yeah,
with a man called the Satrap, who has also become a bit of a favorite in the community.
the Satrap. So, Yeah, so I'm a big Iron Man fan. And so because I'm a big Iron Man fan, the Mandarin has sort of become a favorite comic book villain of mine. And I really, really, really liked Iron Man 3 up until the twist. And anyone who's seen that movie knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that made me very angry as a comic book person. So what I wanted to do was kind of just have an outlet where I could be like, I don't know, what if Ben Kingsley's really kind of fresh and original take on the Mandarin, actually got to be what it was supposed to be, and Stakar kind of grew out of that genesis. Stakar itself as a nation is Persian based. It's the religion of Stakar actually hasn't been sussed out entirely, but I kind of imagine it being a Zoroastrian sort of faith. And the satrap, who is the Mandarin XP, is the leader of the Ten Rings, which is a terrorist group that is kind of waging an insurgency against the Stakari government, who they feel are just kind of puppets of the Cayenne Union. Cayenne being the continent that Stakar is on. So it's kind of a bit of Iron Man. It's a bit of the Mandarin. It's a bit of war in Afghanistan, I guess. But it's been great. It's been great fun to write.
The satrap also has some major issues with the nation of Reganelia, does it not?
Yes. Well, yeah. So the Cayenne Union is sort of led by Reganelia in a way, and Reganelia, or at least in Stakar, because Reganelia is the country that's propping up the current, legitimate government of Stakar that the satrap is waging his insurgency against. So when the satrap kind of, delivers his messages, or if he is directing terrorist insurgency activity, it is more often than not against Reganelia or Reganelian forces. That's who he kind of sees as the big bad in all of this. I'm not saying this is accurate, but in the satrap's estimation, Reganelia is the country that's exploiting Stakar, and the Stakari government he's fighting against is letting it happen.
Okay. Oh, we have an audience demand from Mad Jack. Not a question, a demand. What? He has asked me to ask you about the space raptors, which of course refers to your race in the Aeneas RP.
The Calorians, yes, the space raptors. The Calorians are. I'm gonna be completely honest. I love the Calorians because, as a concept, they've been floating around in my head since I want to say grade 3. I remember being a little kid. I was into dinosaurs, and I remember in grade 3, that was when the Sojourner rover went to Mars, and we were kind of talking about that in school, and my teacher said, all right, everyone, draw what you think an alien would look like. And being a kid who was into dinosaurs, I drew this raptor-looking alien, and it kind of just stuck in my head ever since. So the Calorians are a deep, deep cut into the imagination of Pry. But they're basically if you I guess the best way to describe them is like a Deinonychus. That kind of dinosaur. Imagine if that evolved into a sapient, sentient being. What would that be like? They are very fun because they kind of avoid that whole every sci-fi race has one monoculture trope, in that like there are multiple Colorian nations that are unified under one government, but it kind of gives them some it kind of gives me, freedom to kind of create all kinds of unique little subcultures, but they are all broadly unified in their dislike of humans, and their desire to just take over as much as they can possibly take over, because they are Colorians and they think they are the best.
They're also known slavers, aren't they?
Yeah, they don't like humans, so they enslave. I'm sure they enslave other. I'm sure they enslave other races as well, but the humans have gotten the most play. There was a human nation in Aeneas named Arem that got destroyed by the Colorians, and the remnants of that civilization got enslaved. So yeah, they're slavers. They're not nice people. Like the Colorians, unlike a lot of other stuff that I write, like the Colorians are very much meant to be villains. They're not good. They're not a good bunch. You're not supposed to like them. Don't you're all supposed to love to hate the space raptors. Don't actually love the space raptors.
Too late.
Okay.
So I have an audience question from Zentharida, who corrected me on the pronunciation of his name. So, with all of your hindsight, if you had to start from fresh in TNP without doing anything you've done before, what kind of nation would you make?
Oh, so I'm not allowed to do anything I've done before, huh? What nation would I make? Honestly, I think I'd make something. God, I don't want to sound like I'm ripping off Laws, because I know Laws has been working a lot of like the cowboy Old West stuff into Alnaria lately. I wouldn't do the Old West thing necessarily, but I think I'd do something that was sort of based off of the North American Rockies. Like I don't want to say like I don't want to say Old West. I don't want to say West Coast, but sort of that period. I guess like the Canadian prairies would be a good way to describe it, and then and then into the Americans, kind of like into the United States, sort of like the Rocky area, Colorado, Utah, kind of that West that's not quite the West Coast, and it's not quite the Midwest either. It's not quite Texas, but it's just sort of plains and mountains and that kind of thing. Like that whole kind of culture, I think it could be a really good basis for something. So if I could just if I had to start fresh and I couldn't reference anything else I'd done, I'd do something based on that culture, and then I'd kind of go from there and see what I came up with.
Okay.
Wasteland. Oh, that's not nice, MJ. Wasteland. Come on now. I'd probably even include a rat containment zone.
Sir, I do not appreciate personal shot. Sir. So, you are also one of TNP's most prolific sports guys.
Oh,
other than Heighton. So you helped Heighton organize the 2020 Odenspiel, did you not?
It was a massive group effort. I was involved. Heighton was involved. Sear, Andy, Goy, and Dem were involved. I want to give them shout outs because like they really ran themselves ragged doing the scorinating there, and they deserve to have that recognized because it was pretty thankless.
That's very fair. The,
But
to
yes,
anybody
yes,
who
I was. Yeah, but yes, I was involved in the Odin Spiel. Yes.
And to anyone who doesn't know, the Odin Spiel was the Eris equivalent of the Olympics,
Hmm.
and it was a really nice kind of community thing that was put on by, as you know now, a number of community members.
Yamantau won a few medals.
Like a couple. I think women's boxing was one of them, and I'm pretty proud of that. So, a question from Mad Jack: who are the can't miss a post RPers for you?
Oh wow, this is gonna be where I start like offending people, right? If I
You know
like,
what? You know what? Don't even worry about offending people.
all right,
It's the radio. It's your time. It's okay.
all right. So in no particular order, the can't miss a post RPers are. Well, MJ asked the question, so I'll name him first. MJ, Kyle, Esp, Yulk,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and Andy, I would say, just off the top of my head. Oh, also PAX too.
Oh yeah, yep.
And I would say I would say but the way that you post, I've learned that the best way to enjoy your threads are to just let you get like 4 or 5 out, and then I just spend an afternoon reading them.
I'm sorry. I'm long-winded.
It's fine. I relate and I understand. But yeah, that would be off the top of my that'd be off the top of my head, like the people who it's like, oh, they posted, I gotta read.
Hmm. So we've kind of covered who your can't miss is. Is there anybody that you kind of look up to in this community? It could be someone here. It could be someone in the wider NS community.
Um, there are a few people. This is gonna be like a really boring answer, but it's true, and that's MCM. Especially in terms of gameplay. Uh, like MCM was very key into kind of getting me to a place where in terms of gameplay I felt I could contribute. He was a great mentor for me when I was considering a delegate run. There's also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him because he is one of my closest friends and someone who, and one of the NSers who I've actually met in real life, and that would be Sovereign Dixie, who longtime delegate of Taija 2, close friend of mine. He's not active anymore. He's not active anymore, but he is definitely up there. Other than that, in terms of like who I look up to, honestly, I would just be referencing the people who I just said as like can't miss posts, because all of those people are people who like I look up to, their writing. Like it inspires me. Like God, I hope I don't miss anyone on the second go, but like, again, like Esp, MJ, Kyle, Pax, Andy are people, Yulk, people whose writing I really like, and you know, I because I really like it. I kind of look to them, and I get inspired by their writing, and I try to improve mine. So I'd say definitely those, and then an extra shout out for MJ as well, because like when I took over as lead RP mod, like he has been excellent in just kind of helping me understand, the role and learning the ropes and all that stuff. So yeah.
MJ is I will say this: MJ is one of our kind of guiding light people here in this community. He's a guest that I hope to have on eventually. If you haven't, I'm gonna shill this right here. If you haven't, please go read his RP, Those Green Eyes. There, it is a fantastic series.
It is.
Um, so speaking of Those Green Eyes, you are one of the kind of openly gay members of the community.
Yes.
What kind of role do you believe does like your experience as a member of the LGBT community kind of given to your writing? Like what have you kind of taken from that?
The really obvious answer in RP would be the character of Caleb Stahl, who is actually quite vital to for the King to Valhalla. He's a gay man who was a young army intelligence officer during the latter part of the fascist regime of King Anders III, and because that government, persecuted him, and what he became a syndicalist, and while the syndicalists are undoubtedly, as a whole, a very bad regime, I hope at least that when you read the posts dedicated to Caleb, where he, that you read those going, okay, like I understand where he's coming from and why he did what he did, and he's vital for the King to Valhalla because he's actually the one who's charged with trying to hunt Toby down. So he's actually kind of a very motivating factor in that story. He eventually switches sides to the anti-syndicalist FRE when he sees how far the syndicalists have gone after the harrying of Haddon. But what I wanted to kind of explore was, like, I guess I kind of fell into a trap of heteronormality, in that I realized, like I'm gay, but like most of my characters are just straight up hetero, and I kind of thought about that, and I was like, well, if I do a gay character, I don't want to just have them be a gay character to have a gay character, so I was like, I'm going to kind of pour my frustrations as an openly gay writer, as someone who is openly gay, and also, politically, I wouldn't say right wing, but I am most certainly kind of on the conservative end of the moderate, sector of the spectrum. So I'm a good old red Tory. So, like, it was a lot of frustration with me as kind of like an openly gay person who, has supported, the Conservative Party of Canada, in my, IRL, personal life, and was sort of like, as a gay person who wants to support, these politics, how frustrating it can be when, that space becomes overrun by homophobia, and it is very easily overrun by homophobia. So, like, I was kind of writing Caleb as sort of like, you're gonna drive a lot of gay people, into what not only just to the other side, but potentially into some very radical politics, just because, you people, on the far right, can't shut up about hating the gays. And so Caleb Stahl was a good chance for me to sort of channel a lot of my frustrations, you know, into writing, and then tell a nice redemption story too, because he kind of realizes the syndicalists are trash.
So I have one more question for you before we jump to some audience questions. Another one of your characters that has become quite popular which now starting to notice that you have quite a few of them.
Oh.
Axel Skov, the arms dealer.
Oh, Axel Scott. He's not an arms dealer.
Let's talk about Axel.
He's not an arms dealer. He's a former secret agent.
Let's talk about Axel, because Axel has quite the following among our community as well.
So Axel is the fact that I'm like a huge Bond fan, and and not only am I a Bond fan, but I'm a hipster Bond fan, because my favorite James Bond is Timothy Dalton, right? And so and his 2 movies are excellent, and if you don't like them, you're just wrong. But I had wanted to do kind of like a Bond character in RP for a while, and I had done it on occasion, but like it had never really stuck, and so I decided to make like Timothy Dalton James Bond just a character in RP. So I made Axel Skov. He's a former Prydanian secret agent who was active in the 80s, who in time kind of got caught up with Toby's father, Prince Robert, and then ended up being his, protector slash bodyguard slash, I guess, cool uncle surrogate figure as he grew up.
Okay, so a couple of audience questions here shortly before we wrap up. So Zen has asked, after writing Toby's girlfriend's death, how careful are you when trekking through fields now?
Not careful at all, YOLO.
YOLO, my guy. All right. And Majak has asked, have any swords, or indeed any blade, ever spoken to you?
Once, but I was drunk and it was telling me to eat Pringles.
I feel that spiritually. Another one from Zen from earlier. You say you're fascinated with British radical leftism, yet you do not have medieval proto-unions. Curious.
Medieval proto-unions are a ridiculous concept, and they cause me great angst and anger. That is just an inside joke about some ideas that people have tossed around in RP. But yeah, no, there are no radical proto-unions in Prydanian history. There's no medieval, I guess, carpentry guild where, you've got like the serfs out front with signs demanding better hourly pay or something.
Another kind of fun one from Zen here. Why have you still not named the satrap to the Talibanana?
Because bananas are a very peculiar thing. You really only have a very small window to enjoy a banana before it becomes too ripe, and the satrap is eternal.
All right. We have a more in-character question from Arkanstatska here. What has Prydania's stance been on the war in West Vasa between the Tsar and the WVFS, as well as the September 15 Ramalensk attack?
Okay, so that is an interesting thing and that's actually a pretty good RP too, if I can shill that. But the Prydanian response is broadly that they support Arkanstatska in that scenario. They support their territorial integrity. They would not support the separatists. At the same time, again, Prydania is recovering from a 15-year civil war, and so it has a lot of like concerns that are like pressing right? Prydania doesn't have the military capability or even necessarily the desire to power project itself. So the Prydanian position on the West Vasa conflict is that it supports Arkanstatska. Absolutely. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. At the same time, its ability to effectively help Arkanstatska is limited.
So here's kind of a little two-parter from kind of going off some banter in our microphoneless lounge here. So Zen has asked, why didn't you stop Steve's soldiers from murdering those poor Dutriacan civilians? And Steve has also asked, what is the Prydanian opinion on the war in Yamantau?
The Prydanian opinion on the war in Yamantau, I'll answer that one first. The war in Yamantau, as far as Prydania sees it, and from a purely in character standpoint, Prydania is not a small country, but it's a smallish country, and it's been through a hell of a fucking time, and it's finally starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And so that would probably inform it to be very sympathetic to Yamantau, which is likewise a small country that's been through a lot. Yamantau and Prydania, I think, have a lot of similarities in that they're both very rural, and there is a prominent mining industry as well. So there is probably some connection there as well. But Prydania would see the war in Yamantau as just a far more powerful nation, the Imperium, imposing itself on a smaller country that has been through a lot already, and due to Prydania's history, it's far more willing to sympathize with Yamantau. As for Zen's question, look, Prydania is no longer even fighting against the Dutriecans. They joined the humanitarian coalition, so you goddamn dirty duckies just better be grateful for that.
The dirty duckies. I forgot about that. Oh boy.
What,
Well,
you
guys,
could shoot somebody in the head that did something? What are you talking? What, Zen? Prydania. I need to respond to Zen here. Prydania isn't the nation that wiped out an entire town, nor is it the nation that bombed civilians with a stealth bomber. All right, so
well, guys, that's it for us for our time today. Thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank our guest Prydania and our lovely radio ministry recorder and bullshit put up with her, Kastonvia. Very quickly, though, before we cut, I would also like to say that Pry hosts a sports podcast called Basically a Sports Show, I believe every Monday. Pry, is that correct?
Yep, it's every Monday, and I ping it, and I ping people in the RP server in the Pimp Your Stuff section for anyone who wants to listen in. We broadcast live every Monday, actually, and then you can get the podcast on iTunes or whatever podcatcher you use.
There you have it. Basically a Sports Show, Monday. Tune in. Well,
Indeed.
Guys, non-binary pals, you guys have a fantastic night. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for having me.